Thursday, the 18th of September, 2025. Hope you're all doing well, whatever you're doing, wherever you are. Come to you live to talk with you about stuff. And in this video, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and alts strike back. What do I mean by Bitcoin and alts strike back? Well, if you look at the markets yesterday and so far today, you'll notice that they had some very nice maneuvers on low time frames. And it didn't matter whether you're trading Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, Cardano, Litecoin, whatever, or a bunch of meme coins. There's some very nice little scalps to be had across many different assets. Why? Because of the VEPs. The funny thing is, people were anticipating that the FOMC would make all the movement. Actually, if you look at the VEPs, it was set up to make a move before the FOMC spoke. And it was making the move that it made. And you got to remember, had it gone in the other direction, it would have just been reported, right, in a way that would fit that particular narrative. So the news, once again, the business financial news, once again demonstrates its utter uselessness when it comes to telling people what matters in the financial news sphere. Because honestly, that's not a thing that really matters. Those things they tell you in the news, they're not really that important. They often tell you incorrect information. In fact, when it comes to actual market news, right, updates, like when they tell you the reasons that assets moved a certain way, it's usually misleading misinformation. Now, are there events that will get explained away as in that narrative by leading political authorities? Absolutely. For example, yesterday here in Israel, the prime minister made some comments about how Israel's economy would need to become kind of like a super Sparta, meaning autarkic, which means like self-sufficient, to the degree that we have a goal of reducing the amount of international trade. And the reason for that is because many countries, including a lot of them in the EU, which is Israel's top trading partner, are considering restricting certain trade or ending the free trade agreement between Israel and the EU, which would not be good for Israel's economy, at least in the short term, if we didn't have a system to replace it. And the only way to have that system to replace it is to build self-sufficient systems. The thing is, Israel's a tiny country. We don't necessarily have all of the resources to do that, even if we wanted to. Yeah, there are things we can do maybe as alternatives or whatever, but we probably won't be able to replace everything, at least not easily. Now, does that mean that those things are vital to the existence of the country? Probably not. But do they make the quality of life here better? Probably. Having free trade with the EU is very important for Israel's economy. It's also important for the countries in Europe, by the way. But in any case, following that comment by the prime minister during some whatever that he made, a bunch of people in the business world in Israel were rather unhappy about it, and some trade organization announced a few things about it in response, basically saying that Israel's business leaders do not want to see Israel becoming a Sparta of some kind, and they don't want to be isolated increasingly. They want to be They want to maintain the relationships that Israel has, and it's the war is not worth it, in their opinion, and that we should end this war and get back to being a country that does business with the rest of the world. Bibi's response, Prime Minister Netanyahu's response to that, was to say, well, while we would like, of course, to see the end of the war and to resume business as normal, business as usual, the fact is that we still need to bring back the hostages, and Hamas still has to be removed from power. And then he went to show the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange growth line compared to the S&P 500. I think it was S&P 500 stock line. Look over a period of some years. I think going back to like maybe 2017 or I don't know, a long time ago, 2014, whatever it was. He had a chart there on stage with him, pointing to a very visual, easy to comprehend line, and it showed that Israel Stock Exchange has been significantly outpacing the S&P or whatever line he was showing there. In other words, Israel's economy is growing fine. We have historic unemployment rates. There are still unemployed people, but we do have historic unemployment rates. The shekel is actually, which is the local currency, is actually stronger than it was at the beginning of October, on October 7th, at the beginning of the war. So, and there's more investment capital that has come into Israel, like in record numbers since October 7th. Right? We had a record number of dollars come in 2024, and we had the biggest ever deal signed this year just a few months ago with Wiz. I think it was the biggest, yeah. I think it was the biggest ever deal that an Israeli company had, received foreign investment money. But I think it was Google, right? It's Google. So, we've seen dramatic growth in the economy in certain ways, but we've also seen political handicaps from various military organizations across Europe that are like, or countries across Europe that don't want to send us certain weapons or whatever. And there's a bit of a back and forth about, well, if you don't send us this, we won't send you that. So there's usually some kind of a compromise, and then those things are kind of limited a bit. But if the entire EU votes to remove our free trade status with them, that won't be great news for Israel's economy. Just to be honest about it, obviously. Now, would it dramatically handicap Israel to the point where it can't operate? No, obviously not. But would it make things harder for Israelis? Yeah, it would. Economically. It would probably mean certain products will be harder to find or impossible to find until we get alternatives. It would probably mean some companies will end up firing a bunch of people. It will probably mean less tourism from the EU and to the EU, between Israel and the EU. It would probably mean a number of things that aren't great for Israel's economy. By the way, they're also not great for the reciprocal economies, because you got to remember, all of these actions are reciprocal, right? There's not a one-way street here. Now, of course, we have a much smaller country, and we actually are in an existential threat / war. So we need to defend ourselves, or we may not be here, right? Europe doesn't really have that threat at the moment, right? There's no one actively threatening to invade the EU member states. Of course, they can say, well, yeah, that's why we have to win the war in Ukraine. Right, so much focus on that. But No, of course they focus on Israel because of the political pressure and the money and influence that owns the political leaders across the EU. That money comes from places like Qatar and elsewhere in the region. And it's very much a big tell that Israel and the EU are having this moment now, right? Now that Israel is close to potentially concluding the kinetic part of the fight in Gaza, now the sort of big guns of the political threats and the economic threats that the EU could pull out are coming out. Why? Because they're afraid. What are they afraid of? They're afraid that Israel is going to actually win. And they don't want that. Okay? Yeah, Europe may be our ally. European countries may be our allies. But at the end of the day, the political leaders do not want Israel to ever have an outright victory against our enemies. They want us to constantly be hampered and held back and not achieve victory and peace. Right? That's the ultimate goal here. We're not just fighting this war to fight this war. We want to fight this war to stop the damn wars. And it sounds stupid to even say that. You're fighting a war to stop the war. But the answer is yes. Because the people we're fighting are suicidal or psychotic and don't care about how many people have to die. They want more innocent people to die. We don't. We want them to surrender and give up the hostages. Then there needs to be no more fighting. But they refuse. And the thing is, if we just stop fighting them, they're not going to stop fighting us. They've said so. They will continuously attack us again and again, and they will attempt to do October 7th again and again and again and again. Until all of Israel is destroyed and every man, woman, and child in Israel is killed. And they can tell you they changed their charter or whatever. It doesn't matter. It still is what it is. Right? We're still talking about a situation in which our enemies will not stop attacking us regardless of how many of them there are left. Right? The only way to get past that is to see past these romantic notions of why don't we all just get along and accept reality for what it is and deal with the kinetic problem as it is, not as we want it to be, but as it is. And work towards what we want, but remember that reality takes precedence. Right? That's the priority. The reason it's important to remind people of that is because people have these notions. Should we have a one-state solution, a two-state solution, a three-state solution, an Emirati solution? And the answer is none of the above. Okay? The answer is none of the above in their simplistic format. Each one of them has nuance. You may not like that word, but it's true. And look, the answer can be simple, but even the simple answer has nuance when it comes to this issue. So again, while that may sound contradictory, well, welcome to the Middle East. A lot of things that are reality, that are simple, are also complicated. Things that seem simple are actually more complicated. That is a normal part of the situation we're in. So that is why, for example, when people ask me, what do you think is the solution after the war to make peace? To me, there are many options, and what's most important is that we find ways to build bridges and to reach a new reality, a new understanding of reality, where our extremists don't have to hate them and they don't have to hate us, right? Where we can accept that both live here together, uh, and that we share in the benefits of living here, and that we help each other, and that everybody can see that benefit, right? Because right now, technically speaking, most Israelis benefiting pretty well, but still, it's not as great as it could be because we have to spend so much of our effort on this stupid war, and it's awful. And not just this particular war, but the overall conflict. Second of all, the Palestinians are not thrilled because they don't have the same kind of rights that we have in their land, like in the lands that they control. Yeah, obviously in Israel, they're not Israelis. They don't have the same rights as Israelis, but they have all the same rights that visitors have to this country, minus a few due to security restrictions. But that's a separate issue, right? There's a lot of security concerns that limit certain things that Palestinians can or can't do very easily. They can still do most of them, but they just have to go through a few more security checks to make sure that they're safe and that the people around them are safe. And the only reason that those security checks exist is because of all the suicide bombs and other forms of terrorism that Israel has been attacked by, coming at them from Palestinian people. So, had those attacks not happened, well, those security checks also wouldn't happen. So we need to find some kind of common ground. And we know what a lot of it is, but we do need to establish that common ground for the benefit of both people. Because it's not helpful to Israelis or to Palestinians that this conflict persists. It's just not helpful. And you'd think that a bunch of Jews and Arabs could get together and sort things out. The problem is, unfortunately, the Palestinians are led by terribly corrupt people at the top of the Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, and at the top of the Hamas, and the other groups that provide, some kind of influence in their society. So that's why it's very important to remember, like, the average Palestinian is probably not we know, is not a big fan of the Palestinian Authority. But many of them do support the extremism of Hamas and even of the PA. Remember, the PA is just as violent as the Hamas. Right? They've done also countless suicide attacks and other terror attacks against Israel. Tens of thousands of them have been attempted over the years, and many, many, many of them were carried out. So Israel and the Palestinians need to find a way to live in a way together that shows both people you both benefit from living together, and one side isn't pushed down compared to the other. And again, because the Palestinian leadership is so terrible and so corrupt that many Palestinians themselves don't like the PA, and a growing number of people, reportedly, especially in Gaza, but we still don't have concrete numbers, but still a growing number of people in Gaza don't like Hamas. Remember, Hamas did not win the majority, like the vast overwhelming majority of votes in Gaza. They won like somewhere between 50 and 60%, I think. No, actually they didn't. They won the most votes, but it wasn't an outright majority. It wasn't more than 50%. So they didn't actually win a majority of the votes when they had their election in 2006 and when they took power in 2007. Right? They won not even 50% of the votes, but they won the most votes, which is why they got to be in charge of Gaza after some political back and forth, and then the violence that ensued, right, in which they basically did a coup on Fatah in Gaza, a very violent one. So, wow, this really veered away from what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, right? Bitcoin and alts. The point of all of this is that Netanyahu was demonstrating that Israel's economy, despite being, in a slight difficult position right now, more than just slight, I mean, it's, it is noticeable in some ways already since a while for certain areas of the economy. The bottom line is Israel needs to continue doing what it's doing, but needs to be more self-efficient, and that goes back to like the whole point of my mentioning anything to do with Israel. We'll see in that long 20-minute diatribe about it, or monologue about it, was to make it clear that the information in the news isn't necessarily, or really ever, aligned with reality. Now, yes, the story, you can say, fits the narrative very nicely. Oh, the economy is growing despite the war. But yesterday, on the very day when the comment was made by Netanyahu that Israel needs to be more like a super Sparta, the Israeli market responded by dropping. If you look at the actual Tel Aviv Stock Exchange numbers yesterday, you look at the actual charts, right? Look at the returns, look at the volatility, look at the entropy. You'll see why it was dropping. It was dropping because it was due for a drop, and the probabilities were more towards that way. The fact that Netanyahu said whatever he said did not make any trading algorithms add or remove sell orders. Not because of his words, it's because of what the volatility and the entropy were doing. It's not the words that a person says, right? Those words are just interpreted and fit into the narrative. And when I say the trading bots wouldn't have, it's because the trading bots run the vast majority of all trades on all markets at all times, on any asset class, on any asset. So, sure, the words can be said at a time when the perceived move afterwards or before is then perceived to be exaggerated because of the words. And by the way, it's not like words have no impact. I'm not saying words have no impact. Words have impact in the sense of the average retail trader pays attention to the news, right, will be influenced because they are being misled and misinformed by the news channels. So when they see a story, they go, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is dropping. So they run to their computers or phones and they run their sell orders after the asset's already moved down and is about to, possibly go back up again or whatever. So retail traders are lagging because they're using lagging information. So they're following what the movers are doing. The movers are actually the first to move the markets. That's why they're called the movers. And the market generally, the retail market, right, is also generally going to be paying for the exit liquidity of the winning traders who are already shorted from the top. Right? The same is true whether you're looking at the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange or Bitcoin or alts or NASDAQ or anything else, right? Retail traders are providing exit liquidity for most of the professional traders who are beating them, right? It's not like the retail traders are coming in with amazing leading information of their own and are cashing in on great moves. No, if they were making great moves, they would have made those moves before the smart money. But retail traders aren't making moves usually before the smart money, like the significant moves, because they don't know how. They don't have the information to guide them, to show them. And there are a growing number of tools available to professionals, but not so many for retail people, except for, you know it, alpha trading. Like we made retail tools, or tools that retail users can use, and we even give them out for free to our first-time visitors, or not for, to new people that come into our Discord, and just create a ticket requesting access to what we call the Volatility Starter Pack. It literally gets you free indicators. Hello there. What's this thing? Yeah. So we give away free tools to retail traders precisely so that retail traders can learn to trade volatility and probabilities and statistics, right? Like that is the purpose of alpha trading, is to make sure that users can learn how to trade properly. Why? Because we're sick of seeing retail traders get wrecked by taking stupid positions that they can't actually afford to hold, and money that they can't actually afford to lose gets taken away from them. It's a very bad problem, and it's led by a market that is constantly exploiting the average users. So if you want to learn how to do that, you can for free. Just go to our server. It's at alphatradinghq.com/discord. Again, that address is alphatradinghq.com/discord. Go there, you end up in our Discord server. Go to the create ticket. After you go there, by the way, click on the verify button or the little check mark or whatever it is in the rules channel. Right? Read the welcome message you get. Click on the verify button in the rules channel. You'll get access to all kinds of channels immediately that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. Tons of info. Once you create a ticket to request your volatility starter pack, you get access to, all the main channels of the server, all the educational channels of the indicators. There's a lot of them. Literally, I think there's like 40 or so indicators that we've released, probably more, in just like the last 5 years. And you'll have access to several of them for free completely in the Volatility Starter Pack. You'll get the foundational 4 indicators that teach you how to trade probabilities. We have obviously how to trade volatility, probabilities, and statistics. The entropy stuff that's in our advanced or pro package, which is the only package we sell. We only sell one package of indicators. It's the complete all access pass. We give you dozens of them by default, but any of them that we've released, you can request access to, and we'll give you access if you have a paid subscription. And again, the only reason it's really paid is to make sure our developers get something for their work, our founders, and also to make sure that we keep out kind of like the freeloaders who don't really want to bring the right tools for the job. They just want handouts, which is not the way we do things. You know, we want people to learn for free, yeah. But like, if you're not willing to step up your game to the next level, it's like any job, you know, in any particular line of work, whenever you want to, especially if you're starting something for yourself, yeah, you have to invest in the right tools if you're going to be doing your own work. Sure, if you hire someone to do the work for you, well, then they need to have those tools, right? Somebody, whoever's providing the service, has to invest in those tools. So whether you're doing the trading, or whether your friend is doing the trading, or whether your broker is doing the trading for you, doesn't matter. They got to do the right tools for you, right? They got to use the right tools. And if you want to be an independent trader, capable of, you know, doing your own trades whenever you want, well, then you need the right tools, and that's exactly what our indicators are and what they provide. So that's going to do it for now. I'm going to be catching up with you guys later, and hopefully that's been useful. And I know it was a very roundabout way with a very long side quest discussion about a completely different situation, but I hope you saw how I tied it all back in for you and made it all relevant. Anyway, that'll do it for now, folks. Take care. Peace.